Shen Qingqiu said quietly. That's not the problem. Luo Binghe didn't relent. Then, what is the problem? Shen Qingqiu held up his fan. Let's solve the problem before us first. Then we can talk later. Luo Binghe slowly backed off, then smiled. All right, he said lightly. After all, we'll have time to talk later. Everyone in their group could sense that countless creatures lurked all around them, ready to pounce, hiding in the densely clustered foliage and waist-high grass, as well as between the gaps in the stark white heaps of rubble. Jewel-green eyes and hissing breaths rose and fell like tiny ripples. At this time, the advantage of having Luo Binghe as a vanguard became fully apparent. Whichever direction he walked toward, the ill winds immediately ceased, becoming as silent as the grave. The creatures waiting in ambush either played dead en masse or fled in a panic, rustling as they went. To put it plainly, it was like they were avoiding the plague. With that kind of divine assistance, they reached their goal in far less time than they'd anticipated. If within some swirling white fog, a location that spewed black chi straight up into the sky suddenly appeared, look, anyone who wasn't blind would definitely find it strange. The mountain cave's entrance was covered in a dense cloak of green leaves, gloomy and forbidding. When standing by the entrance, there was a sense of chill. Everyone stopped in their tracks, hesitant. Their original expectation had been that, before reaching this place, they would need to kill 800 enemy generals, slaughter another 1,000 demonic creatures, and cut their way through all kinds of poisonous insects and alien plants. Only then would they painfully arrive at the final level. Even if it were to be less eventful, surely their clothes needed some blood on them to be worthy of a boss fight. I'm afraid we can't act recklessly, said a sect leader. We should first investigate and ascertain the situation, another agreed. But of course, said Luo Binghe. He'd just finished speaking when Mo Beijun sent Shang Qinghua flying forward with a kick. And he really did go flying. Under Shen Qingqiu's shocked gaze, Shang Qinghua tumbled and skidded as he went flying into the hole to, quote, investigate and ascertain the situation, unquote. After a long dead silence, a terrifying scream suddenly exploded from within the cave. With lightning speed, Shen Qingqiu grabbed a handful of leaves from a vine. He'd just charged into the cave with the rest when he heard a voice. So we meet again, Peak Lord Shen. At the back of the cave, Xingmo had been stabbed into a crack within the rocks. That black chi and purple miasma they'd seen was pouring from its blade. Tianlongjun sat atop a green stone, and not too far in front of it stood Shang Qinghua. Sunlight from outside spilled into the cave, illuminating part of Tianlongjun's body. Right away, someone gasped, drawing in a mouthful of cold air. Shen Qingqiu finally understood why Shang Qinghua had screamed so terribly seconds ago. Though the smile on Tianlongjun's face was as elegant as ever, the right half of his face was near entirely the dark purple of necrosis, making his smile tremendously unnerving. His left sleeve hung limp, completely empty. It seemed the arm that had kept falling off could no longer be reattached. This dilapidated, near-disseminated appearance was far from the final boss Shen Qingqiu had envisioned. He couldn't help but pay attention to Luo Binghe, but on that face there was only a tranquility that seemed almost wooden, and Shen Qingqiu couldn't tell what it meant. Tianlangjun tilted his head.
Less people than I would have thought. I expected it to be like that time on Bailu Mountain, with hundreds of masters all coming at me together. Wang humphed.
Look at that ghastly appearance of yours. Not to mention, you're without even a single underling. Who would need that many people?
I indeed have not a single underling, but I do have a nephew.
The words had barely left Tianlangjun's mouth when a green shadow flushed through the cave. Zhu Zilang silently placed himself in front of Tianlangjun, shielding him. For some reason, this master and servant both gave off an air of wretchedness. Being unsuited to a demonic energy, Tianlangjun's dew mushroom body had deteriorated to the point of falling apart. That was understandable. However, Zhu Zilang's eyes too had yellowed, and his neck, cheeks, forehead, arms, just about any part of him that was exposed, now crawled with scales. The result was sinister and frightening, as well as deeply reminiscent of his half-man, half-snake form back in the cave of Bailu Forest.
Big Lord Shen,
he rasped. Yes, it's me, said Shen Jingqiu. How did you end up like this? And what connections do you have with this person this time, martial brother? Yue Qingyuan asked, composed as ever. Deep connections. The situation had only progressed to its current state with the heavy involvement of said person. Shen Qingqiu wanted to say something when Tianlangjun raised his chin, squinting at Yue Qingyuan.
I remember you.
After thinking for a moment, he said with conviction,
Back then, the Donghua Palace's old geezer wanted you to help him with the ambush, but you ignored him, so you're the current sect leader of Changqiu Mountain. Not bad.
Your distinguished self's memory is also quite good, Yue Qingyuan said. Tianlangjun smiled and smiled, then gave a sigh.
If you were also trapped in a pitch-black darkness for over 10 years, unable to glimpse the sky or sun, with nothing to pass the days but for reminiscing over past affairs, your memory would be quite good as well.
This time, no one answered him. Yue Qingyuan gripped Xuan Su's sword, then struck at Tianlangjun with a sheathed sword. With a rumbling roar, half of the cave wall behind him collapsed right then and there, opening up a large hole. Outside, there was nothing but sky, while swirling sand and loose rocks plummeted into the depths below. Cold air streamed into the cave as fine snowflakes drifted in a slow dance, dazzling the eyes. From the frozen river 300 meters below, one could faintly hear wave after wave of beastly howls and the sounds of slaughter. The first wave of southern border demons had already landed.
Let me guess. Baijian Peak is again fighting as a vanguard. Am I correct?
Tianlangjun asked. The dozens of people on the scene dispersed, then rushed him from various angles. At the front of the assault, Wang swung his staff with fierce vigor, his movements vicious. Though Xuan Su's sword slowly forced Zhu Zilang back, he still dutifully drew the brunt of the attacks. Tianlangjun continued to sit upon his stone, completely at ease.
I remember you also waited until the last moment to draw your sword that day, he said to Yue Qingyuan. Doing the same now?
Yue Qingyuan didn't answer, He was about to land a palm strike on Zhuo Zilang when another sect leader stole in front of him and attacked first. Zhuo Zilang neither avoided nor retreated, taking the blow head-on, but it was that sect leader who screamed instead. Shen Qingqiu's pupil contracted. "Don't touch him," he yelled. "His entire body is poisonous." In the chaos of battle, several people were poisoned, while several others were sent flying out of the cave by the explosive surges of demonic qi and spiritual energy. They careened out into the high altitudes, plummeting downward before they managed to flip themselves back onto their swords, thereby regaining their footing. Shan Qinghua stealthily snuck toward Shen Qingqiu's location. Zhuo Zilang was overwhelmed by the excitement of battle, so when he glimpsed a suspicious figure creeping away, he flung 2 green snakes at them without thinking. Shen Qingqiu saw all this clearly. He flipped his hand over, ready to send out a leaf to save, quote, Great Master Aeroplane's life, when the 2 snakes were suddenly pierced in midair by a razor-sharp shard of ice. Mo Beijing appeared within the circle of battle like a wraith. He picked up Shan Qinghua, tossing him in Shen Qingqiu's direction like one with a little chick, then pummeled Zhuo Zilang with his fists. In the ensuing 10 seconds, Shen Qingqiu witnessed what a real, quote, beatdown looked like. With Zhuo Zilang under Mo Beijing's crazed and relentless assault, the attacks besieging Tianlangjun grew suddenly fiercer. Though Tianlangjun was missing an arm and was only 1 against many, his poise wasn't at all diminished. Why must you be like this again? Ganging up on one person? Don't you think that victory won by an unequal advantage is immoral? A sect leader attacked him. Ha! Against a malicious and demonic monster like you, who wishes to see the world burn? What morals are there to speak of? In the next moment, that sect leader's skull split open like a garlic clove, rent into multiple chunks. Tianlangjun pulled his hand back and smiled. Honestly, in the beginning, I had no malice, nor did I find it fun in the idea of the world burning. I only occasionally crossed the border, coming here to sing songs or read books. It was quite nice. However, since I've already been in residence beneath Bailu Mountain for so many years, if I don't follow through on something along the lines of your thoughts, I truly find my circumstances a bit too unjustified. Yue Qingyuan flicked his finger. Xuanzu's sword sprung 3 inches from its sheath, its spiritual energy seething. The bones on Tianlangjun's body cracked and popped, almost like his joints had been dislocated. He made a sound of surprise. As expected of sect leader. Not bad. Your master was quite mediocre, but had quite the eye for disciples and successors. Then Tianlangjun reached out and grabbed Xuanzu's blade directly, as if he couldn't feel a thing. But why not draw it all the way? He said with a smile. You can't do anything to me with only this much. Yue Qingyuan's gaze hardened, and Xuanzu's sword jumped another ½ inch from its sheath. He can't do anything to you, Duo Binghe said, suddenly cold. But what about me? Tianlangjun's smile hadn't faded when, suddenly, a stream of powerful demonic qi slammed into him like a blow from an axe. His remaining arm was blasted off his body, then whipped outside the cave like a gust of wind, hurtling down and away from Maigul Ridge. Duo Binghe was finally taking action! In this father versus son rematch, it was finally Tianlangjun's turn to be powerless to fight back. Duo Binghe's eyes were blindingly crimson, his face taut, and his attacks were ruthless, without the slightest hint of mercy. with both of Tianlongdring's arms severed. He even began to look like he had been overwhelmed and backed into a corner. Meanwhile, after much difficulty, Zhu Zilang had managed to break free from Mo Beijing. His face was a mess of blood and gore, but when he saw his master in trouble, he rushed straight over, like all the bloodlust had gone to his head. Right at that moment, Tianlongdring's demonic chi swept over Wu Wang, sending him flying as blood sprayed from his mouth, and Master Wu Chen ran to catch him. Zhu Zilang was about to slam into him when Shen Qingqiu saw this unfortunate turn and swept in front of Wu Chen, shielding him. As soon as Zhu Zilang saw Shen Qingqiu, a shred of clarity flashed through those bright yellow eyes, and he abruptly braked, disrupting his balance as he staggered and nearly fell. Just as he was about to detour around Shen Qingqiu to assist Tianlongdring, a beam of white light shot swiftly toward them. Zhu Zilang's back slammed heavily into the cave wall. He'd been impaled through the chest against the rocks. The long, slender blade buried in his chest was Zhen Yang's sword. Shen Qingqiu turned his head to see Luo Binghe slowly withdraw his hand. Tianlongdring serenely stood about 6 meters behind him. After a short while, he gracefully fell to the ground.